You didn't survive by luck. You died inside, and yet you came back breathing. The world calls this weakness. But I'll tell you the brutal truth. That pain was your initiation. If you still believe that empathy is blind kindness, you will be devoured again. If you think silence is peace, it's just a prison of the ego. And if you think that surviving is already a victory, you are mistaken, because surviving is not enough. Here, no one will sell you cheap comfort. Here, we're going to rip off your mask with a scalpel. If this scares you, leave now. If this resonates with you, sign up now, because this is the cut that will wake you up. You feel the call before you even name it. It's a chill down your spine, a heavy silence that pierces your chest like a blade. It's not chance, it's psychic gravity. Light and shadow always attract each other because they need to meet. Those who have never read Carl Jung call it bad luck or karma, but those who delve into spirituality understand it's the architecture of the unconscious. The ego screams that it's danger, but the self whispers that it's initiation. The encounter with the narcissist isn't romance, it's archetypal destiny, a rite of passage disguised as passion. The hand that beckons is the same one that later claims your soul. The first test of the underground is not to run from your own biography. Your body knows when it's wrong, but your mind remains silent, and it's in this inner silence that the mask finds a chink. Note this, every time you suppress your discomfort, you open a gate. Every time it swallows its scream, it signs a contract with the shadow. It's not about blaming the other, it's about understanding where you first betrayed yourself. The call comes like this, disguised as desire, but hiding your lesson. Want something practical? Write down 3 signs you ignored in your last call, the saccharine compliment that seemed rehearsed, the rush to call you salvation, the discomfort you stifled with silence because your ego wanted to believe. This was already the underground opening its way. Anyone who understands Carl Jung knows what you deny dominates you, what you face returns to the self. Therefore, a vigilance exercise, 10 minutes a day in silence, without a screen, without music, without escape. Observe how your mind creates excuses, how your ego tries to keep you numb. And when you write, don't embellish. Write naked, raw, without justifications. This journal becomes your descent map. If you want a cutting reading, pick up Memories, Dreams, Reflections, and read it like a scalpel, not like a fan. The spirituality that saves isn't the one that caresses, it's the one that forces you to face your shadow. And if you need practice, start small. Draw the scene of your bait, the look that caught you, the phrase that caught you, the fear that sold you. Name the spell, because only the one who names it can break it. Now look straight ahead. Your emotional history pushed you to the door of this dark room. It wasn't bad luck, it was preparation. Childhood trained you to be a beacon in a darkened house, and a lighthouse attracts ships, but also pirates. This is how the shadow chooses its victim. This isn't a sentence, it's a summons. The call demands that you descend consciously, not hypnotized. It demands that you stop confusing compassion with servitude, surrender with dissolution. It demands that you return the ego to its rightful place, servant, not king. Only the self knows the way back. Spirituality doesn't ask for blind kindness, it asks for courage. The courage to say no without justification, the courage to leave without explanation, the courage to tremble and still keep your word. Want some practice? Create your 3 non-negotiable limits and read them aloud, looking in the mirror. Feel your body tremble because the ego addicted to approval will resist. But tremble and speak, because the underground only respects those who know how to leave. And down there waits your next mirror, the mirror of poison, where everything turns sour to show you that it always tasted like ash. When the empath accepts the call and enters the underground, the first test is drinking from the wrong chalice. The chalice has no wine, it has bile. You begin to carry a pain that isn't yours, a guilt that wasn't born within you, a rage that was stuffed into your chest as if it were a borrowed heart. This is where the game reveals itself. The narcissist doesn't deal with his own shadow, he pours it into you because your body has the crack open to receive it. And you, accustomed since childhood to translating the silence of the house, accept it. Your ego calls it love, your self knows it's poison, but as you swallow this poison, something deeper happens. Your identity begins to dissolve. You no longer know if the pain is yours or if it's planted. You look in the mirror and don't recognize the eyes that return. This is the mirror of poison. It doesn't just reflect, it distorts. It returns to you the shadow of others as if it were your inheritance. The poison acts silently, but it's corrosive. It infiltrates your routine as if it were normal. You feel ashamed for things you didn't do. You apologize for crimes you didn't commit. You justify yourself even before being accused. This is the poison dominating your psyche, making your ego believe you're small, fragile, and guilty. And the more you absorb, the deeper the narcissist engraves the script. Want a brutal exercise? Write down on a sheet of paper all the guilt you carry today. Read it out loud. Now in red, mark which ones were truly born of your actions. I guarantee you, 80% aren't yours. They're planted projections. And by realizing this, you begin to break the spell. Because the self, when awakened, doesn't swallow poison as if it were food. It spits it out. It returns to the underground what doesn't belong to it. But to get to this point, you need to have the courage to face that most of what weighs you down isn't your burden. It's a borrowed burden. And it's precisely at this point that many break. Because the poison, when accumulated, creates mental confusion. You begin to question your own sanity. You live trapped in a hall of mirrors, each reflection telling you it's your fault. And that's where the narcissist wins, if you believe the lie. But here lies the key. Every time you feel guilt without cause, be suspicious. Every time you feel shame without action, observe. This is their shadow trying to colonize your inner territory. Want direct practice? Create a poison diary. Every night, write down the phrase that echoed in your mind and destroyed you during the day. Then on the front write, "This is not mine." Repeat until your body believes it, because the mirror of poison won't magically disappear. It will shatter when you refuse to project it. And when it shatters, what appears behind it isn't just your face. It's the next corridor, the labyrinth of masks, where you will discover that the poison wasn't just liquid, it was theater performed before your eyes. The poison is already corroding from within, but the next blow isn't liquid, it's a performance. The narcissist doesn't live in truth, he lives in a theater. Every gesture is a mask, every word a rehearsed script, every emotion a calculated manipulation. And you, the empath, enter this stage believing you're in a relationship, but in reality, you're in a macabre spectacle. The problem is that in this labyrinth, there are no doors, only mirrors. You try to escape, but in each reflection, a distorted version of yourself is returned. The guilty one, the ungrateful one, the crazy one. And little by little, you lose your grip on reality. This is where the ego shatters, groundless, without reference, believing that perhaps the fault is yours. But remember, Carl Jung once said that where there is an excess of persona, there is an absence of soul. And in this theater, the shadow is the true director. The cruelest thing about the labyrinth is that you begin to doubt your own perception. If he says you're exaggerating, you believe him. If he claims you're making it up, you swallow it. If he swears he loves you, you confuse pain with affection. This is the heart of manipulation, hijacking your gaze and delivering back a vision that was never yours. Want a practical test? Write down a recent situation that caused you pain and describe how you perceived it. Then he asks someone you trust, someone outside the scene, to analyze it. Often, this external perspective is the blade that cuts the web, because complicit silence is what keeps the labyrinth standing. Only when you dare to share your version do you realize, no, you're not crazy. The problem is that you believe so much in the theater that you forgot there's a world outside it, and the more you remain silent, the stronger the theater grows. This is the moment when true spirituality becomes urgent, because only the self can penetrate masks without losing itself. The ego, addicted to approval, tries to negotiate, tries to explain itself, tries to be accepted by the audience that never existed. But the self doesn't negotiate. It observes, recognizes, and follows. In the maze of masks, survival depends on the courage to tear the veil. Exercise. When you notice an inconsistency between word and deed, record it. Don't debate, don't plead, don't justify yourself, just record it. Because recording is building a way out. The maze isn't undone by logic, but by accumulated lucidity. Each note is a brick removed, each record is a path traced outward. And when you begin to see the masks falling, the pain increases, because realizing is always more painful than denying. But it is also at this point that alchemy begins. And then you approach the next rite, death and the alchemist, where everything collapses to be burned in the inner fire. The time comes when the theater implodes and you have nowhere left to run. The poison has corroded, the masks have fallen, and what's left is the fall. This is the death that is not physical but psychic. It is the collapse of the ego, the feeling that you have ceased to exist, the raw emptiness. Here there is no cheap consolation, no "it will pass." Here you feel as if you are being crushed by your own unconscious, but it is in this abyss that the self begins to manifest. What was once only pain now becomes forge fire. The shadow, which seemed to devour you, transforms into raw material. And you begin to realize that all authentic spirituality involves the destruction of illusions. It is not about improving your life, it is about dying to the false. This is alchemy. When your world crumbles, the gold you never knew begins to melt within you. In ancient alchemy, the process began with putrefaction, the moment when everything rots and is then reborn. And that's exactly what you feel. Relationships rot, memories rot, even your self-image rots. You look in the mirror and recognize nothing. This is the Nigredo stage, the absolute black, where the light disappears. But pay attention, the death of the ego is not your end, it's your initiation. Practical example, take what causes you shame or pain today and write it as if it were matter. I feel abandonment, lead. I feel anger, sulfur. I feel guilt, mercury. This symbolic exercise puts you in the place of an alchemist. You stop being a victim of pain and begin to manipulate it as a substance. It is in this act that death begins to become power, because those who face putrefaction with awareness are already beginning the transmutation. And this is the kind of practice that differentiates a survivor from an awakened one. The collapse hurts, but it also reveals. In the midst of the darkness, there is a tiny point of light, a breath of life that insists. This breath is the self, and it doesn't scream, it whispers. It says, it's not over, it's just begun. But to hear it, you need to cross the silence without distraction. Many, upon feeling symbolic death, run to anesthesia, alcohol, medication, compulsive distractions. But this only postpones the process. The true alchemist remains in the fire until he burns out. Brutal exercise. Choose a habit you use to escape the pain, infinite scrolling, food, TV shows, and cut it out for 7 days. 7 days without anesthesia. Feel death without a mask. This is the cauldron of transmutation, because when you can bear to look at it head on, something changes at the core. Pain becomes fuel. Emptiness becomes space, and dust becomes gold. It is at this point that consciousness opens a new eye. And this eye is what takes you to the next stage, the look that sees beyond, when you realize that you no longer see as you used to. After symbolic death, your eyes are no longer the same. What you once called love now feels like a contract of servitude. What seemed like care now feels like manipulation. It's as if the collapse has ripped away the veil and placed a new lens on your soul. This is the gaze that sees beyond, not naive, not blind, but penetrating. You begin to see the hidden games, the small gestures that reveal intentions, the phrases you previously ignored and now expose the entire theater. This is painful because it destroys your nostalgia. You realize that much of what you experienced was a farce, and accepting this is like swallowing glass. But it is also liberating. The self finally sees without the distortions of the ego. And this gaze is what paves the way for true spirituality, not the kind that sugarcoats, but the kind that reveals. And once you see, there is no going back. The gaze doesn't come for free. It costs innocence, it costs naivety, it costs the version of you that believed in all the masks. Now you bear the mark of someone who has seen the shadow up close. Want a practical exercise? Choose 3 situations from your week in which someone said something to you that seemed normal. Write that sentence down. Now analyze what was hidden behind it. The compliment that contained venom, the advice that contained control, the silence that contained contempt. This practice refines your perception and places you in the position of a lucid observer, because the narcissist only thrives where there is blindness. When you see, the game is over. But seeing also hurts. You'll notice things in your family, friends, work, and you'll feel isolated. This is the price of lucidity. But remember, as Carl Jung said, those who look outside dream, those who look inside awaken. Your awakening has begun, and it won't stop. This new perspective even changes the way you relate to time. You no longer rush to please, you observe. You no longer justify yourself, you record. You no longer fall for easy promises. You see hidden intentions. This is where your ego tries to sabotage you again, whispering that you're too cold, that you've lost your heart. But no, you haven't lost, you've purified. What was once naivete is now discernment, and discernment is the invisible armor of the self. Want direct practice? Before accepting any invitation, any proposal, you ask, what does this cost me? And what mask do I see here? These 2 questions alone save your energy from being devoured, and this sharp vision will mark you, will separate you, will make you strange to many. But it will also prepare you for the next rite, the marks of initiation, where you understand that each wound left not only pain, but a sacred inscription on your psychic flesh. Every journey leaves scars. They are not signs of weakness, but sacred inscriptions. Every wound the narcissist inflicted on you is not just pain, it is proof of initiation. You bear marks that cannot be erased, and that is precisely what sets you apart from those who never descended into the subterranean. These marks are like tattoos inscribed by the unconscious. They remind you of what you endured and warn you of what you must never accept again. The difference is that you must choose what to do with them. Either you treat them as a curse and carry the weight, or you understand them as scripture and carry the power. The self asks you not to hide these scars, but to learn to look at them without shame. True spirituality is not the kind that disguises, but the kind that accepts that your psychic skin was cut and yet remained intact. It is in this recognition that your authority is born, not from those who speak beautifully, but from those who bled and survived. Want a straightforward exercise? Write down in a notebook the 3 most powerful wounds you carry. Don't just describe what happened, but write down what it taught you. Perhaps one taught you to recognize manipulation before a promise. Another taught you to say no without apologizing. Another showed you that silence can be violence. This act of naming transforms your wound into a symbol. It stops being just pain and becomes a map, because a scar isn't just a reminder of an attack, it's also a reminder of survival. As Carl Jung said, where there is a wound, there is the task. Your task is not to erase the mark, but to decipher it. And when you understand this, your ego loses its power to shame you. It can no longer use your past against you, because you've already turned it into a tool. It's at this point that your shadow begins to align with you, not against you. But don't romanticize it. Scars hurt when time changes. Your triggers will still scream, your body will still tremble, your heart will still race when memories are stirred. This doesn't mean you haven't evolved. It means your initiation still pulses within you. The difference is that now you know what these pains mean. They aren't signs of weakness, they're signs that you carry knowledge that can't be bought. Want brutal practice? Share your scar out loud with someone you trust. Not as a victim, but as a witness. This act tears through the shame and transforms your story into a weapon. And it's a weapon not in the sense of hurting, but of protecting. Because those who have bled don't let themselves be bled cheaply again. And this is where the crossing opens up to the next risk. The danger of the stone, when the accumulated pain can harden you so much that you forget you still need to feel. After carrying poison, surviving the labyrinth, and emerging marked, comes the most silent temptation, turning to stone. It's when your heart decides it will never feel again. It feels like protection, but it's a prison. You harden, build walls, promise yourself, I will never love again, I will never trust again, I will never open up again. This is understandable. Your ego calls it defense, but your self knows it's a slow death. Because true spirituality isn't freezing the soul, it's refining it. Turning to stone is easy, just stop feeling. The hard part is remaining vulnerable without being devoured. And herein lies the risk. Confusing maturity with coldness, confusing wisdom with cynicism. Those who have been empaths run the risk of becoming their own executioners, and that's the danger, exchanging the role of the sacrificed for that of the petrified. Want a real-life example? How many survivors have you seen swearing never to get into a relationship again? They believe this is victory, but deep down, it's fear dressed up as courage. It's like buying an iron safe and then throwing away the key. The safe protects, but it also imprisons you. Here, you need to look beyond that. Realize that shutting yourself off completely is just another way of remaining trapped by the narcissist, even after they've left. Practical example. Every time you catch yourself saying, never again, take a deep breath and replace it with, this time different. Write this phrase down and post it where you see it every day. Because this reminder saves you from turning your wound into a wall. The silence that protects too much becomes a prison. And the one who gets trapped is you, not the shadow. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying to blindly open your heart again. I'm saying not to kill your ability to feel. Stone doesn't love. Stone doesn't create. Stone doesn't transform. The self asks you to keep your heart alive, but armed with discernment. Want direct practice? Choose a small relationship. It could be friendship, family, even with strangers, and test minimal vulnerability. You share something true, but without exposing yourself completely. Observe how your body reacts. Observe whether the other person honors or despises you. This practice teaches you to open yourself without dissolving. Because the danger is no longer being devoured, but being fossilized, and only those who pass this test can fly again. It is at this point that the image of fire in the ashes appears and announces the next rite, the return of the phoenix, when you realize that you not only survived, but were reborn in another form. The moment comes when you realize something burned inside you, and it wasn't just pain. It was an old identity turning to ash. The empath who went underground isn't the same one who comes out. What returns isn't fragile, isn't naive, isn't easy meat to be devoured. What returns carries fire in its wings. This is the return of the phoenix, your soul reborn with new gravity. You still feel, but it's no longer confusing. You still love, but you don't sacrifice yourself for anyone. You still shine, but you don't surrender your light to any hungry shadow. This is what differentiates survival from resurrection. The survivor only breathes. The reborn flies. And flying doesn't mean escaping the world, but facing it from above, with a broader vision. This is the reward of symbolic death. You return paradoxically, tender and fierce at the same time. But he doesn't confuse the phoenix's fire with egotistic arrogance. This fire isn't vanity, it's discernment. It burns away what no longer serves you and illuminates your own path. Want a practical exercise? Write a list of things you only did out of fear of losing the other person. Always giving in, keeping your opinion to a minimum, accepting crumbs. Now you consciously decide that each of them will be reduced to ash. Burn this list literally on a piece of paper. This ritual isn't superstition, it's psyche in action. You symbolize to your unconscious that the phoenix doesn't return carrying dead weight, because what defines you now isn't the poison you swallowed, but the gold you transmuted. And it's at this point that the world begins to notice the difference. Your gaze has changed, your energy has shifted, your presence carries gravity. Those who encounter you feel it, even without understanding. They're no longer the same. The phoenix doesn't return for its own sake. It also returns for the collective, because your journey wasn't private, it was also a right of witness. You become a living symbol that it's possible to cross hell and emerge with wings, and this symbol disturbs. Some will be inspired, others will turn away, because your mere presence exposes their masks. This is the price, and also the vocation. Authentic spirituality is never just individual. It overflows. You now carry a light that isn't innocent. It's honed. It's the kind of light that comforts those who seek and wounds those who pretend. Want direct practice? Share your story nakedly, without embellishment, with someone still trapped in the labyrinth. Not to save, but to bear witness. Because witnessing is a fire that ignites others. This is the return of the phoenix. It's not about forgetting what you burned, it's about using your own ashes as fuel. And this fire prepares the next inevitable clash. The confrontation with the narcissist within, where the fight stops being with the other and begins against yourself. You've spent your life running from the narcissist outside, but now the most brutal battle begins, facing the narcissist within. Yes, it exists. It doesn't have the other person's face, it has yours. It's the part of your psyche that inflated when you wanted to be indispensable. It's the part that used pain as currency. It's the fragment of your ego that thrived on being a savior, even if it cost you your soul. This is the toughest confrontation, because there's no point in pointing fingers. You need to look in the mirror and admit it. Anyone who understands Carl Jung knows what you condemn in others also breathes within you. This is the hardest shadow to accept, but without it, there is no true spirituality, only a mask. And a mask, as you already know, is a prison. The self only awakens when you embrace even the traits that most shame you. Want direct practice? Write down on a sheet of paper the phrases you most hated hearing from the narcissist. You're not enough. Without me, you're nothing. You need me. Now ask yourself, when do you repeat these phrases to yourself? In what situations have you said this internally, or even to someone else, even silently? This is the narcissist speaking through your mouth. Confrontation requires brutality. Admitting that within you also resides a hunger for control, a fear of vulnerability, a desire to be adored. This isn't to condemn you, it's to free you, because only when you recognize that this shadow is yours can you integrate it into yourself. Otherwise, you'll spend your life hunting monsters outside and feeding one within. This recognition is living alchemy. The poison that once came from outside now dissolves within you because you've finally decided to drink without denying it. But be careful. The inner narcissist is cunning. He disguises himself as self-protection, rationality, even spirituality. He says, close your heart, it's wisdom. He says, you don't need anyone, it's independence. But deep down, it's disguised fear. The test here is simple and cruel. Look at your impulse to control, to manipulate, to hide behind the mask of strength. Ask, is this my ego acting in fear or my self-guiding truth? The body responds, the ego releases tension, the self brings peace, even in confrontation. Practical example, when you feel the urge to manipulate someone through silence, take a deep breath and speak your truth without embellishment. This is what breaks the cycle. This is the confrontation that frees you, admitting that the narcissist also lives within you, but doesn't need to be your king. It is in this acceptance that the journey reaches its final stage, the silence of the self, where there is no defense, no theater, no mask, only the naked authenticity of being able to say, I am. After traversing the underworld, drinking poison, dying and being reborn, there comes a point where there's nothing left to prove. There's no more audience, no more theater. Just you and the silence. But this silence isn't empty, it's plenitude. It doesn't demand, it doesn't accuse, it doesn't judge. It simply is. Here, the ego finally falls silent, and the self speaks, not with words, but with presence. It's the first time you feel peace that doesn't depend on anyone, not on applause, not on borrowed love, not on validation. This silence is the sound of your soul standing tall without crutches. And the brutal truth is that many people fear this because they prefer noisy pain to true stillness. But this is where the final initiation lies. When you accept that being whole isn't noise, it's root. Want direct practice? Sit in silence for 15 minutes without distractions, without a phone, without music, just you and your breath. Observe how your mind struggles, how your ego invents urgencies, how the shadow tries to haunt you with ancient voices. It doesn't fight, it doesn't run away, it just witnesses. This exercise seems small, but it's a revolutionary act, because every time you endure silence, you amplify the voice of the self within you, and that's when you discover you no longer need a mask, no longer need defense, no longer need theatrics. You can simply be. This is the power that frightens the world, because the world feeds on people in disguise. But those who have found silence carry an independence that cannot be stolen. It's the freedom that doesn't depend on approval, because it originates in the core of the soul. The silence of the self is not inertia, it is power. It doesn't paralyze you, it anchors you. It doesn't make you passive, it gives you clarity. You still feel, but you don't drown. You still love, but you don't lose yourself. You still live, but you don't become confused. This silence is the loudest voice you've ever heard because it doesn't come from outside, it comes from the center. And when you rest in it, your entire trajectory makes sense. The call, the poison, the masks, the death, the phoenix, the confrontation, everything was preparation for this point. Here, you are no longer an empath, nor a victim, nor a survivor. You are presence, you are truth, you are what Carl Jung called individuation, the union of your light with your shadow, the reconciliation of the human with the eternal. And when you reach this silence, nothing remains but the simplest and most powerful affirmation, I am. So tell me, how many more times are you going to call poison love? How many times will you hide behind silence, pretending it doesn't hurt? How many times will you repeat the scene, hoping for a different ending? You already know the answer. And if you deny it, it's just your shadow laughing at you. If this tore you up inside, sign up now, because that was just the first cut.